When was the first atomic theory proposed?
John Dalton, 1766 to 1844, an English natural philosopher, chemist, physicist, and teacher, developed the concepts of an atomic theory in the early 19th century. He published a new system of chemical philosophy in 1808. His main concepts of atomic theory may be summarized as: all matter, solid, liquid, and gas, consists of tiny, indivisible particles called atoms. All atoms of a given element have the same mass and are identical, but are different from the atoms of different elements. Chemical reactions involve the rearrangement of combinations of those atoms, not the destruction of atoms. When elements react to form compounds, they combine in simple, whole number ratios.
How many hairs does the average person have on his or her head?
The amount of hair on the head varies from one individual to another. An average person has about 100,000 hairs on their scalp. Blondes 140,000, brunettes 155,000, and redheads only 85,000. Most people shed between 50 to 100 hairs daily.
How often can a person donate blood?
Blood is one of the most easily donated tissues. According to the American Red Cross, a person in good health who weighs at least 110 pounds, 50 kilograms, can donate blood every 56 days. Platelets may be donated every 7 days up to 24 times per year. Plasma may be donated every 28 days up to 13 times per year.
Which part of mistletoe is poisonous?
The white berries contain toxic amines, which cause acute stomach and intestinal irritation with diarrhea and a slow pulse. Mistletoe should be considered a potentially dangerous Christmas decoration, especially if children are around.
What is the normal pH of blood?
The normal pH of arterial blood is 7.4, while the pH of venous blood is about 7.35. Arterial blood has a slightly higher pH because it has less carbon dioxide.
What regulates body temperature in humans?
The hypothalamus controls internal body temperature by responding to sensory impulses from temperature receptors in the skin and in the deep body regions. The hypothalamus establishes a set point for the internal body temperature. Then constantly compares this with its own actual temperature. If the two do not match, the hypothalamus activates either temperature decreasing or temperature increasing procedures to bring them into alignment.
What do the 7.5-minute quadrangle maps represent?
One of the most popular maps of the United States Geologic Survey, USGS, is the 7.5-minute quadrangle map. Produced at a scale of 1:24,000. Each of these maps covers a four-sided area of 7.5 minutes latitude and 7.5 minutes longitude. The United States has been divided into precisely measured quadrangles. Each quadrangle in a state has a unique name. The maps of adjacent quadrangles may be combined to form a large map. There are more than 54,000 USGS topographic maps that cover the 48 contiguous states and Hawaii.
What parts of plants are used for spices?
Spices are aromatic seasonings derived from many different parts of plants, including the bark, buds, fruit, roots, seeds, and stems.
How long is the digestive tract?
The digestive tract, also called the alimentary canal, is approximately 30 feet, 9 meters, long from the mouth to the anus. The small intestine is about 22 feet, 7 meters, long. The large intestine is about 5 feet, 1.5 meters, long.
Do viruses contain both DNA and RNA?
Viruses have either DNA or RNA as their genomic material, whereas cells including bacteria have both.
Is DNA always copied exactly?
Considering how many cells there are in the human body and how often it occurs, DNA replication is fairly accurate. Spontaneous damage to DNA is low, occurring at the rate of 1 to 100 mutations per 10 billion cells in bacteria. The rate for eukaryotic genes is higher, about 1 to 10 mutations per million gametes. The rate of mutation can vary according to different genes in different organisms.
Who received the first heart transplant?
On December 3, 1967, in Cape Town, South Africa, DR. Christian Barnard, 1922–2001, and a team of 30 associates performed the first heart transplant. In a 5-hour operation, the heart of Denise and Darville, 1943–1967, age 25, an auto accident victim, was transplanted into the body of Louis Washinsky, 1913–1967, a 55-year-old wholesale grocer. Washinsky lived for 18 days before dying from pneumonia. The first heart transplant performed in the United States was on a 2.5-week-old baby boy at Maimonides Hospital, Brooklyn, New York, on December 6, 1967, by Dr. Adrian Kantrowitz. 1918–2008, the baby boy lived 6.5 hours. The first adult to receive a heart transplant in the United States was Mike Kasparak. 1914–1968, age 54, at the Stanford Medical Center in Palo Alto, California, on January 6, 1968. Dr. Norman Shumway, 1923–2006, performed the operation. Mr. Kasparak lived 14 days. Almost no transplants were done in the 1970s because of the problem of rejection of the new heart by the recipient's immune system. In 1969, Jean-François Borel, 1933, discovered the anti-rejection drug cyclosporin. But it was not widely used until 1983 when the FDA granted approval. Today, heart transplantation is an established medical procedure with 212 transplants performed in 2009. The percentage of patients surviving 3 years is more than 80%.
What are the major parts of the ear?
The major parts of the ear are the external ear, middle ear, and inner ear.
What are the two forms of stroke?
There are two forms of stroke, ischemic and hemorrhagic. Ischemic stroke is the blockage of a blood vessel that supplies blood to the brain. Ischemic strokes account for 80% of all strokes. Hemorrhagic stroke is bleeding into or around the brain. Hemorrhagic strokes account for 20% of all strokes. The symptoms of stroke appear suddenly and include numbness or weakness, especially on one side of the body, confusion or trouble speaking or understanding speech, trouble seeing in one or both eyes, trouble walking, dizziness, or loss of balance or coordination, or severe headache with no known cause. Often more than one of these symptoms will be present, but they all appear suddenly.
What is Wi-Fi?
Wi-Fi is a wireless local area network. The Wi-Fi Alliance certifies that network devices comply with the appropriate standard. IEEE 802.11. A Wi-Fi hotspot is the geographic boundary covered by a Wi-Fi access point. There were estimates that at the end of 2009 there were more than 250,000 public hotspots.
Who is the only U.S. president to receive a patent?
On May 22, 1849, 12 years before he became the 16th U.S. president, Abraham Lincoln, 1809 to 1865, was granted U.S. Patent Number 6,469 for a device to help steamboats pass over shoals and sandbars. The device, never tested or manufactured, had a set of adjustable buoyancy chambers. Made from metal and waterproof cloth, attached to the ship's sides below the water line. Bellows could fill the chambers with air to float the vessel over the shoals and sandbars. It was the only patent ever held by a United States president.
Why are alchemical symbols for metals and astrological symbols for planets identical?
The ancient Greeks and Romans knew 7 metals and also knew 7 planets. The 5 nearer planets plus the Sun and the Moon. They related each planet to a specific metal. Alchemy, originating in about the 3rd century BCE, focused on changing base metals, such as lead, into gold. Although at times alchemy bordered on mysticism, it contains centuries of chemical experience, which provided the foundation for the development of modern chemistry.
How do cells communicate with each other?
Cells communicate with each other via small signaling molecules that are produced by specific cells and received by target cells. This communication system operates on both a local and long-distance level. The signaling molecules can be proteins, fatty acid derivatives, or gases. Nitric oxide is an example of a gas that is part of a locally based signaling system and is able to signal for a human being's blood pressure to be lowered. Hormones are long-distance signaling molecules that must be transported via the circulatory system from their production site to their target cells. Plant cells, because of their rigid cell walls, have cytoplasmic bridges called plasmidesmata that allow cell-to-cell communication. Animals use gap junctions to transfer material between adjacent cells.
Why is Legionnaire's disease known by that name?
Legionnaire's disease was first identified in 1976 when a sudden, virulent outbreak of pneumonia took place at a hotel in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where delegates to an American Legion convention were staying. The cause was eventually identified as a previously unknown bacterium that was given the name Legionella pneumophilia. The bacterium probably was transmitted by an airborne route. It can spread through cooling tower or evaporation condensers in air conditioning systems, and has been known to flourish in soil and excavation sites. Usually, the disease occurs in late summer or early fall, and its severity ranges from mild to life-threatening, with a mortality rate as high as 15%. Symptoms include diarrhea, anorexia, malaise, headache, generalized weakness, recurrent chills, and fever accompanied by cough, nausea, and chest pain. Antibiotics such as erythromycin, TM, are administered along with other therapies. Fluid replacement, oxygen, etc., that treat the symptoms.
Who is generally regarded as the discoverer of the electron, the proton, and the neutron?
The British physicist Sir Joseph John Thomson. 1856 to 1940, in 1897 researched electrical conduction in gases, which led to the important discovery that cathode rays consist of negatively charged particles called electrons. The discovery of the electron inaugurated the electrical theory of the atom, and this, along with other work, entitled Thomson to be regarded as the founder of modern atomic physics. Ernest Rutherford discovered the proton in 1919. He also predicted the existence of the neutron, later discovered by his colleague, James Chadwick, 1891 to 1974. Chadwick was awarded the 1935 Nobel Prize in Physics for this discovery.
How many layers does Earth's atmosphere contain?
The atmosphere, the skin of gas that surrounds Earth, consists of 5 layers that are differentiated by temperature. The troposphere is the lowest level, it averages about 7 miles, 11 kilometers. In thickness, varying from 5 miles, 8 kilometers, at the poles to 10 miles, 16 kilometers, at the equator. Most clouds and weather form in this layer. Temperature decreases with altitude in the troposphere. The stratosphere ranges between 7 and 30 miles, 11 to 48 kilometers, above Earth's surface. The ozone layer, important because it absorbs most of the sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation, is located in this band. Temperatures rise slightly with altitude to a maximum of about 32 degrees Fahrenheit 0 degrees Celsius. The mesosphere, above the stratosphere, extends from 30 to 55 miles, 48 to 85 kilometers, above Earth. Temperatures decrease with altitude to minus 130 degrees Fahrenheit minus 90 degrees Celsius. 45 The thermosphere, also known as the heterosphere, is between 55 to 435 miles, 85 to 700 kilometers. Temperatures in this layer range to 2696 degrees Fahrenheit 1475 degrees Celsius. The exosphere, beyond the thermosphere, applies to anything above 435 miles, 700 kilometers. In this layer, temperature no longer has any meaning. The ionosphere is a region of the atmosphere that overlaps the others, reaching from 30 to 250 miles, 48 to 402 kilometers. In this region, the air becomes ionized, electrified, from the sun's ultraviolet rays. This area affects the transmission and reflection of radio waves. It is divided into three regions: the D region, at 35 to 55 miles 56 to 88 kilometers. The E region, heaviside canally layer, 55 to 95 miles 88 to 153 kilometers. And the F region, Appleton layer, 95 to 250 miles 153 to 402 kilometers.
Why do cells die?
Cells die for a variety of reasons, many of which are not deliberate. For example, cells can starve to death, asphyxiate, or die from trauma. Cells that sustain some sort of damage, such as DNA alteration or viral infection, frequently undergo programmed cell death. This process eliminates cells with a potentially lethal mutation or limits the spread of the virus. Programmed cell death can also be a normal part of embryonic development. Frogs undergo cell death that results in the elimination of tissues, allowing a tadpole to morph into an adult frog.
How has the classification of organisms changed throughout history?
From Aristotle, 384 to 322 B. CE, to Carolus Linnaeus, 1707 to 1778, scientists who proposed the earliest classification systems divided living organisms into two kingdoms: plants and animals. During the 19th century, Ernst Haeckel, 1834 to 1919, proposed establishing a third kingdom: protistophore. Simple organisms that do not appear to fit in either the plant or animal kingdom. In 1969, R. H. Whittaker, 1920 to 1980, proposed a system of classification based on 5 different kingdoms. The groups Whittaker suggested were the bacteria group Prokaryotae, originally called Monera, Protista; fungi, 4 multicellular forms of non-photosynthetic heterotrophs and single-celled yeasts, Plantae, and Animalia. This classification system is still widely accepted. However, a 6-kingdom system of classification was proposed in 1977 by Carl Woese, 1928. The groups proposed in the 6-kingdom approach are Archaebacteria and Eubacteria. Both for bacteria, Protista, fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. In 1981, Woese proposed a classification system based on 3 domains. A level of classification higher than kingdom bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. The domain eukarya is subdivided into 4 kingdoms: Protista, fungi, plantae, and animalia.
What are riptides and why are they so dangerous?
At points along a coast where waves are high, a substantial buildup of water is created near the shore. This mass of water moves along the shore until it reaches an area of lower waves. At this point, it may burst through the low waves and move out from shore as a strong surface current moving at an abnormally rapid speed known as a rip current. Swimmers who become exhausted in a rip current may drown unless they swim parallel to the shore.
Who discovered the first hormone?
The British physiologists William Bayliss, 1860–1924, and Ernest Starling, 1866–1927, discovered secretin in 1902. They used the term hormone, from the Greek word hormon, meaning to set in motion, to describe the chemical substance they had discovered that stimulated an organ at a distance from the chemical site of origin. Their famous experiment using anesthetized dogs demonstrated that dilute hydrochloric acid mixed with partially digested food, activated a chemical substance in the duodenum, the upper part of the small intestine. This activated substance, secretin, was released into the bloodstream and came into contact with cells of the pancreas. In the pancreas it stimulated secretion of digestive juice into the intestine through the pancreatic duct.
Who was the first person to map the Gulf Stream?
In his travels to and from France as a diplomat, Benjamin Franklin, 1706–1790, noticed a difference in speed in the two directions of travel between France and America. He was the first to study ships' reports seriously to determine the cause of the speed variation. As a result, he found that there was a current of warm water coming from the Gulf of Mexico that crossed the North Atlantic Ocean in the direction of Europe. In 1770, Franklin mapped it. Franklin thought the current started in the Gulf of Mexico. However, the Gulf Stream actually originates in the western Caribbean Sea and moves through the Gulf of Mexico, the Straits of Florida, then north along the east coast of the United States to Cape Hatteras in North Carolina, where it becomes northeast. The Gulf Stream eventually breaks up near Newfoundland, Canada, to form smaller currents or eddies. Some of these eddies blow toward the British Isles and Norway, causing the climate of these regions to be milder than other areas of northwestern Europe.
What are the functions of the muscular system?
Muscles are identified as being voluntary muscles or involuntary muscles. The skeletal muscles are called voluntary muscles because the person controls their use. They are used to move the various parts of the body. Smooth muscles, found in the stomach and intestinal walls, vein and artery walls, and in various internal organs, are called involuntary muscles, because they are not generally controlled by the person. The cardiac muscles, or the heart muscles, are also involuntary muscles.
How far is the Moon from Earth?
Since the Moon's orbit is elliptical, its distance varies from about 221,463 miles, 356,334 kilometers, at perigee, closest approach to Earth, to 251,968 miles, 405,503 kilometers. At apogee, farthest point, with the average distance being 238,857 miles, 384,392 kilometers.
When do solar eclipses happen?
A solar eclipse occurs when the Moon passes between Earth and the Sun and all three bodies are aligned in the same plane. When the Moon completely blocks Earth's view of the Sun and the umbra, or dark part of the Moon's shadow, reaches Earth, a total eclipse occurs. A total eclipse happens only along a narrow path 100 to 200 miles. 160 to 320 kilometers, wide, called the track of totality. Just before totality, the only parts of the Sun that are visible are a few points of light called Baily's beads shining through valleys on the Moon's surface. Sometimes, a last bright flash of sunlight is seen, the diamond ring effect. During totality, which averages 2.5 minutes but may last up to 7.5 minutes. The sky is dark and stars and other planets are easily seen. The corona, the Sun's outer atmosphere, is also visible. If the Moon does not appear large enough in the sky to completely cover the Sun, it appears silhouetted against the Sun with a ring of sunlight showing around it. This is an annular eclipse. Because the Sun is not completely covered, its corona cannot be seen. And although the sky may darken, it will not be dark enough to see the stars. During a partial eclipse of the Sun, the penumbra of the Moon's shadow strikes Earth. A partial eclipse can also be seen on either side of the track of totality of an annular or total eclipse. The Moon will cover part of the Sun and the sky will not darken noticeably during a partial eclipse.
What is the difference between human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, and AIDS?
The term AIDS applies to the most advanced stages of HIV infection. The Center for Disease Control, CDC, definition of AIDS includes all HIV infected people who have fewer than 200 CD41 T cells per cubic millimeter of blood. Healthy adults usually have CD41 T cell counts of 1000 or more. The definition also includes 26 clinical conditions. Mostly opportunistic infections, that affect people with advanced HIV disease.
What is anorexia?
Anorexia simply means a loss of appetite. Anorexia nervosa is a psychological disturbance that is characterized by an intense fear of being fat. It usually affects teenage or young adult women. This persistent fat image, however untrue in reality, leads the patient to self-imposed starvation and emaciation. Extreme thinness, to the point where 1/3 of the body weight is lost. There are many theories on the causes of this disease, which is difficult to treat and can be fatal. Between 5 and 10% of patients hospitalized for anorexia nervosa later die from starvation or suicide. Symptoms include a 25% or greater weight loss, for no organic reason. Coupled with a morbid dread of being fat, an obsession with food, an avoidance of eating, compulsive exercising and restlessness. Binge eating followed by induced vomiting, and/or use of laxatives or diuretics.
What are some uses for coal other than as an energy resource?
In the past, many of the aromatic compounds, such as benzene, toluene, and xylene were made from coal. These compounds are now chiefly byproducts of petroleum. Naphthalene and phenanthrene are still obtained from coal tar. Coal tar, a byproduct of coal, is used in roofing.
How much money can be saved by lowering the setting on a home furnace thermostat?
Studies have shown that a 5 degrees Fahrenheit reduction in the home thermostat setting for approximately 8 hours will save up to 10% in fuel costs.
What are loofah sponges?
Loofahs are non-woody vines of the cucumber family. A fibrous skeleton lies inside of the fruit, and this structure is often used as a sponge. The term loofah is commonly used when this material is used as a sponge. Dishcloth gourd, rag gourd, and vegetable sponge are other popular names for this sponge.
What is spam?
Spam, also called junk email, is unsolicited email. Spam is an annoyance to the recipient and may contain computer viruses or spyware. It often advertises products that are usually not of interest to the recipient and are oftentimes vulgar in content. Estimates suggest that as many as 1 billion spam messages are sent daily. Many email programs have spam filters or blockers to detect spam messages and either delete them or send them to the junk mailbox.
What is the origin of the term hurricane?
The term hurricane is derived from hurricane, the Carib god of evil, which was derived from the Mayan god Hurricane. Hurricane was one of the Mayan creator gods, who blew his breath across the chaotic water and brought forth dry land.
How can the temperature be determined from the frequency of cricket chirps?
Listen for the chirping of either katydids or crickets. Then count the number of chirps you hear in 1 minute. For the following equation, C equals the number of chirps per minute, for katydids. Fahrenheit temperature equals 60 plus, C 19/3 for crickets, Fahrenheit temperature equals 50 plus, C 50/4.
How long does it take for the soft spots on a baby's skull to disappear?
The soft spots of a baby's skull are areas of incompletely ossified bones called fontanelles. The bones of the skull are connected by fibrous, pliable, connective tissue at birth. The flexibility of these connections allows the skull bones to move and overlap as the infant passes through the birth canal. The fontanelles begin to close about 2 months after birth. The largest of the fontanelles, the frontal fontanelle located on the top of the skull, does not close until 18 to 24 months of age.
What is a light year?
A light year is a measure of distance, not time. It is the distance that light, which travels in a vacuum at the rate of 186,282 miles, 299,792 kilometers per second, can travel in a year, 365.25 days. This is equal to 5.87 trillion miles, 9.46 trillion kilometers.
Is assembly language the same thing as machine language?
While the two terms are often used interchangeably, assembly language is a more user-friendly translation of machine language. Machine language is the collection of patterns of bits. recognized by a central processing unit, CPU, as instructions. Each particular CPU design has its own machine language. The machine language of the CPU of a microcomputer generally includes about 75 instructions. The machine language of the CPU of a large mainframe computer may include hundreds of instructions. Each of these instructions is a pattern of ones and zeros that tells the CPU to perform a specific operation. Assembly language is a collection of symbolic, mnemonic names for each instruction in the machine language of its CPU. Like the machine language, the assembly language is tied to a particular CPU design. Programming in assembly language requires intimate familiarity with the CPU's architecture. And assembly language programs are difficult to maintain and require extensive documentation. The computer language C first developed in the late 1980s. Is a high-level programming language that can be compiled into machine languages for almost all computers. From microcomputers to mainframes, because of its functional structure. It was the first series of programs that allowed a computer to use higher-level language programs. And is the most widely used programming language for personal computer software development. C++ was first released in 1985 and is still widely used today.
What are truffles?
Truffles, a delight of gourmets, are arguably the most prized edible fungi. Found mainly in Western Europe. They grow near the roots of trees, particularly oak, but also chestnut, hazel, and beech, in open woodlands. Unlike typical mushrooms, truffles develop 3 to 12 inches. 7.6 to 30.5 centimeters, underground, making them difficult to find. Truffle hunters use specially trained dogs and pigs to find the flavorful morsels. Both animals have a keen sense of smell and are attracted by the strong, nut-like aroma of truffles. In fact, trained pigs are able to pick up the scented truffle from 20 feet, 6.1 meters, away. After catching a whiff of a truffle scent, the animals rush to the origin of the aroma and quickly root out the precious prize. Once the truffle is found, the truffle hunter, referred to in French as trufficulteur, carefully scrapes back the earth to reveal the fungus. Truffles should not be touched by human skin, as doing so can cause the fungus to rot.
What is the difference between short-day plants and long-day plants?
Short-day and long-day plants exhibit a response to photoperiodism, or the changes in light and dark in a 24-hour cycle. Short-day plants form flowers when the days become shorter than a critical length, while long-day plants form flowers when the days become longer than a critical length. Short-day plants bloom in late summer or autumn in middle latitudes. Examples of short-day plants are chrysanthemums, goldenrods, poinsettias, soybeans, and ragweed. Long day plants bloom in spring and early summer. Some examples of long day plants are clover, irises, and hollyhocks. Florists and commercial plant growers can adjust the amount of light a plant receives to force it to bloom out of season.
What are some examples of numbers and mathematical concepts in nature?
The world can be articulated with numbers and mathematics. Some numbers are especially prominent. The number 6 is ubiquitous. Every normal snowflake has 6 sides. Every honeybee colony's combs are 6-sided hexagons. The curved, gradually decreasing chambers of a nautilus shell are propagating. Spirals of the golden section and the Fibonacci sequence of numbers. Pine cones also rely on the Fibonacci sequence, as do many plants and flowers in their seed and stem arrangements. Fractals are evident in shorelines, blood vessels, and mountains.
When will the sun die?
The Sun is approximately 4.5 billion years old. About 5 billion years from now, the Sun will have burned all of its hydrogen fuel into helium. As this process occurs, the Sun will change from the yellow dwarf as we know it to a red giant. Its diameter will extend well beyond the orbit of Venus, and even possibly beyond the orbit of Earth. In either case, Earth will be burned to a cinder.
What is an organ system?
An organ system is a group of organs working together to perform a vital body function. There are 12 major organ systems in the human body.
Where is the oldest operational nuclear power plant in the United States?
The oldest operational plant in the United States is the Oyster Creek, New Jersey, plant. It became operational on December 1, 1969. The original license for the Oyster Creek power plant was scheduled to expire on April 9, 2009. On April 8, 2009, the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission approved a 20-year license extension until April 9, 2029. The 9 Mile Point Unit 1 also became operational on December 1, 1969. Its original license was to expire on August 22, 2009. But on October 31, 2006, the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission granted a 20-year extension to its license, extending it to August 22, 2029. Since the license for Oyster Creek was issued before the license for 9 Mile Point, Oyster Creek is officially the oldest operating U.S. reactor.
How does an independent variable differ from a dependent variable?
An independent variable is manipulated and controlled by the researcher. A dependent variable is the variable that the researcher watches and/or measures. It is called a dependent variable because it depends upon and is affected by the independent variable. For example, a researcher may investigate the effect of sunlight on plant growth by exposing some plants to 8 hours of sunlight per day and others to only 4 hours of sunlight per day. The plant growth rate is dependent upon the amount of sunlight, which is controlled by the researcher.
Are there trees that predict the weather and tell time?
Observing the leaves of a tree may be an old-fashioned method of predicting the weather. But farmers have noted that when maple leaves curl and turn bottom up in a blowing wind, rain is sure to follow. Woodsmen claim they can tell how rough a winter is going to be by the density of lichens on a nut tree. Trees can also be extraordinary timekeepers. Griffonia, in tropical West Africa, has 2-inch, 5-centimeter inflated pods that burst with a hearty noise, indicating that it is time for farmers of the Accra Plains to plant crops. Trichilia is a 60-foot, 18-meter, tree that flowers in February and again in August, signaling that it is time, just before the second rains arrive, for the second planting of corn. In the Fiji Islands, planting yams is cued by the flowering of the coral tree.
Do any animals besides people snore?
Many animals have been observed snoring occasionally, including dogs, cats, cows, oxen, sheep, buffaloes, elephants, camels, lions, leopards, tigers, gorillas, chimpanzees, horses, mules, zebras, and elands.
Who invented thermopane glass?
Thermopane insulated window glass was invented by C. D. Haven in the United States in 1930. It is 2 sheets of glass that are bonded together in such a manner that they enclose a captive air space in between. Often this space is filled with an inert gas that increases the insulating quality of the window. Glass, in general, is also one of the best transparent materials because it allows the short wavelengths of solar radiation to pass through it, but prohibits nearly all of the long waves of reflected radiation from passing back through it.
How are genes physically found in a specific genome?
Finding one gene out of a possible 30,000 to 40,000 genes in the human genome is a difficult task. However, the process is made easier if the protein product of the gene is known. As an example, if a researcher is looking to find the gene for mouse hemoglobin. He or she would isolate the hemoglobin from mouse blood and determine the amino acid sequence. The amino acid sequence could then be used as a template to generate the nucleotide sequence. Working backward again, a complementary DNA probe to the sequence would be used to identify DNA molecules with the same sequence from the entire mouse genomic library.
Why were tomatoes often called love apples and considered aphrodisiacs?
Tomatoes belong to the nightshade family. They were cultivated in Peru and introduced to Europe by Spanish explorers. Tomatoes were introduced to Italy from Morocco. So the Italian name for the fruit was Pomi d'amore, meaning apples of the Moors. The French called the tomato pommes d'amour, meaning apples of love. This latter name may have referred to the fact that tomatoes were thought to have aphrodisiac powers. Or it may have been a corruption of the Italian name. When tomato plants were first introduced to Europe, many people viewed them with suspicion. Since poisonous members of the nightshade family were commonly known. Although the tomato is neither poisonous nor an aphrodisiac. It took centuries for it to fully overcome its undeserved reputation.
Who made the first successful synthetic gemstone?
In 1902, Auguste Victor Louis Vermeuil, 1856–1913, synthesized the first man-made gemstone, a ruby. Vermeuil perfected a flame fusion method of producing crystals of ruby and other corundums within a short time period.
What are Venn diagrams?
Venn diagrams are graphical representations of set theory, which use circles to show the logical relationships of the elements of different sets, using the logical operators. Also called in computer parlance Boolean operators, and, or, and not. John Venn II, 1834–1923, first used them in his 1881 symbolic logic, in which he interpreted and corrected the work of George Boole, 1815–1864, and Augustus de Morgan, 1806–1871. While his attempts to clarify perceived inconsistencies and ambiguities in Boole's work are not widely accepted, the new method of diagramming is considered to be an improvement. Venn used shading to better illustrate inclusion and exclusion. Charles Dodgson, 1832–1898, better known by his pseudonym Lewis Carroll, refined Venn's system, in particular by enclosing the diagram to represent the universal set.
What is the role of friction in striking a match?
The head at the tip of a strike anywhere match contains all the chemicals required to create a spark. A strike anywhere match only needs to be rubbed against a surface with a high coefficient of friction, such as sandpaper, to create enough frictional heat to ignite the match. Safety matches differ from strike anywhere matches since the chemicals necessary for ignition are divided between the match head and the treated strip found on the matchbox or matchbook. The friction between the match head and treated strip will ignite the match. Matches fail to ignite when wet because water reduces friction.
What is dyslexia and what causes it?
Dyslexia covers a wide range of language difficulties. In general, a person with dyslexia cannot grasp the meaning of sequences of letters, words, or symbols, or the concept of direction. The condition can affect people of otherwise normal intelligence. Dyslexic children may reverse letter and word order, make bizarre spelling errors, and may not be able to name colors or write from dictation. It may be caused by minor visual defects, emotional disturbance, or failure to train the brain. New evidence shows that a neurological disorder may be the underlying cause. Approximately 90% of dyslexics are male. The term dyslexia, of Greek origin, was first suggested by Professor Rudolf Berlin of Stuttgart, Germany, in 1887. The earliest references to the condition date as far back as 30 CE when Valerius Maximus and Pliny described a man who lost his ability to read after being struck on the head by a stone.
What is the Big Crunch theory?
According to the Big Crunch theory, at some point in the very distant future, all matter will reverse direction and crunch back into the single point from which it began. Two other theories predict the future of the universe, the Big Bohr theory and the plateau theory. The Big Bohr theory, named because it has nothing exciting to describe, claims that all matter will continue to move away from all other matter and the universe will expand forever. According to the plateau theory, expansion of the universe will slow to the point where it will nearly cease, at which time the universe will reach a plateau and remain essentially the same.
What percent of human body weight is water?
The human body is 61.8% water by weight. Water is found in every tissue.
Who is associated with developing the concept of wind chill?
The Antarctic explorer Paul A. Sippel, 1908 to 1968, coined the term wind chill in his 1939 dissertation. Adaptation of the explorer to the climate of Antarctica. Sippel was the youngest member of Admiral Richard Byrd's Antarctica expedition in 1928 to 1930. And later made other trips to the Antarctic as part of Byrd's staff. And for the U.S. Department of the Interior assigned to the U.S. Antarctic expedition. He also served in many other endeavors related to the study of cold climates.
What is a miner's canary?
Miner's canary refers to the birds used by miners to test the purity of the air in the mines. At least 3 birds were taken by exploring parties. And the distress of any one bird was taken as an indication of carbon monoxide danger. Some miners used mice rather than birds. This method of safety was used prior to the more sophisticated equipment used today.
Which 2 cervical vertebrae allow the head to move?
The first 2 cervical vertebrae, C1 and C2, allow the head to move. The first cervical vertebra, the C1 or atlas, articulates with the occipital bone of the skull and makes it possible for a person to nod his or her head. The second cervical vertebra, C2, known as the axis, forms a pivot point for the atlas to move the skull in a side-to-side rotation.
When does dreaming occur during the sleep cycle?
Almost all dreams occur during REM sleep. Scientists do not understand why dreaming is important. One theory is that the brain is either cataloging the information it acquired during the day and discarding the data it does not want, or is creating scenarios to work through situations causing emotional distress. Regardless of its function, most people who are deprived of sleep or dreams become disoriented, unable to concentrate, and may even have hallucinations.
What was the first animal to be successfully cloned?
In 1970, the British molecular biologist John B. Gordon, 1933, cloned a frog. He transplanted the nucleus of an intestinal cell from a tadpole into a frog's egg that had had its nucleus removed. The egg developed into an adult frog that had the tadpole's genome in all of its cells and was therefore a clone of the tadpole.
What is meant by the modern era of genetics?
Mendel's work was really not appreciated until advances in cytology enabled scientists to better study cells. In 1900, Hugo de Vries, 1848 to 1935, of Holland, Karl Correns, 1864 to 1933, of Germany, and Erich von Tschermak, 1871 to 1962, of Austria examined Mendel's original 1865 paper and repeated the experiments. In the following years, chromosomes were discovered as discrete structures within the nucleus of a cell. In 1917, Thomas Hunt Morgan, 1866 to 1945, a fruit fly geneticist at Columbia University, extended Mendel's findings to the structure and function of chromosomes. This and subsequent findings in the 1950s were the beginning of the modern era of genetics.
How much air does a person breathe in a lifetime?
During his or her life, the average person will breathe about 75 million gallons. 284 million liters of air per minute. The human body needs 2 gallons, 7.5 liters, of air when lying down, 4 gallons, 15 liters. When sitting, 6 gallons, 23 liters, when walking, and 12 gallons, 45 liters, or more when running.
Which species have become extinct since the Endangered Species Act was passed in 1973?
Nine domestic species have become extinct.
Are there any diamond mines in the United States?
The United States has no commercial diamond mines. The only significant diamond deposit in North America is Crater of Diamonds State Park near Murfreesboro, Arkansas. It is on government-owned land and has never been systematically developed. For a small fee, tourists can dig there and try to find diamonds. The largest crystal found there weighed 40.23 carats and was named the Uncle Sam diamond. Diamonds crystallize directly from rock melts rich in magnesium and saturated with carbon dioxide gas that has been subjected to high pressures and temperatures exceeding 2,559 degrees Fahrenheit 1,400 degrees Celsius. These rock melts originally came from deep in Earth's mantle at depths of 93 miles, 150 kilometers. Diamonds are minerals composed entirely of the element carbon, with an isometric crystalline structure. The hardest natural substance, gem diamonds, have a density of 3.53, though black diamonds, black carbon coke-like aggregates of microscopic crystals, may have a density as low as 3.15. Diamonds have the highest thermal conductivity of any known substance. This property enables diamonds to be used in cutting tools, because they do not become hot.
What are the alkaline earth metals?
These are beryllium, B, element 4, magnesium, Mg, element 12, calcium, Ca, element 20. Strontium, senior, element 38, barium, Ba, element 56, and radium, Ra, element 88. The alkaline earth metals are also called group 2 elements. Like the alkali metals, they are never found as free elements in nature and are moderately reactive metals. Harder and less volatile than the alkali metals, these elements all burn in air.
Why does the risk of cancer diminish rapidly after one quits the cigarette smoking habit?
Exposure of a premalignant cell to a promoter converts the cell to an irreversibly malignant state. Promotion is a slow process, and exposure to the promoter must be sustained for a certain period of time. This requirement explains why the risk of cancer diminishes rapidly after one quits smoking. Both cancer initiators and promoters appear to be contained in tobacco smoke.
What was the first technical report written in English?
Geoffrey Chaucer's 1343–1400 treatise on the astrolabe was written in 1391.
How is casting out nines used to check the results of addition or multiplication?
The method of casting out nines is based on the excess of nines in digits of whole numbers. The remainder when a sum of digits is divided by 9. Illustrating this process in the multiplication example below. The method begins by adding the digits in both the multiplicand, one of the terms that is being multiplied, and the multiplier, the other term being multiplied. In the example below, this operation leads to the results of 13 and 12, respectively. If these results are greater than 9, then the operation is repeated until the resulting figures are less than 9. In the example below, the repeated calculation gives the results as 4 and 3, respectively. Multiply the resulting excess from the multiplicand by the excess from the multiplier, 433 below. Add the digits of the result to eventually yield a number equal to or less than 909. Repeat the process of casting out nines in the multiplication product. The result of the multiplication process. The result must equal the result of the previous set of transactions. In this case 3. If the two figures disagree, then the original multiplication procedure was done incorrectly. Casting out nines can also be applied to check the accuracy of the results of addition.